I'm going to call this plan board for, it's our last plan board of year for December 8th, 2022, and if Mr. Castillo will call the roll, please.
Sure. Robert Ackerman,
I'm here.
Rance Torres,
I'm here.
Tina Certain, Sophia Corrugetto,
Here.
Jason Sanchez,
Here.
Jason Hirsch, Joshua Nay,
Here.
Stephanie Sun.
Here.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to welcome our two new plan board members, Jason Suarez and Rance Torres. They won't be able to...
Sanchez.
Sanchez. That's okay. They won't be able to vote today, but they will be able to participate in the discussion. I understand we have at least one petition has asked to be deferred, and do we need to do that?
Yeah, we can do that at the adoption of the agenda.
Well, that's where we are on the adoption of the agenda, so.
That was number 7, right?
Yeah, I think it's the Lighthouse Church.
Correct.
Is requested that they be moved to a day certain. Is
To
that
the
correct?
February planning board meeting, which is, well, you can say the February planning board meeting.
Okay.
February, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda, moving item 7, the Lighthouse Church SUP, to a time certain of the February plan board meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Could I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
Wait. I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I have one item out of order to discuss. It's in some time that not quite sure how this happened. Public comment got moved to the end of the meeting rather than being now. And if the board doesn't object, I would like to have this be public comment so that anybody who's going to make a comment doesn't have to sit all the way through the whole agenda. So without objection, if there's anybody here that would like to make a comment on an item that is not on our agenda tonight, please come speak. Seeing none, we'll start with the first item.
Good evening, plan board members. For the record, my name is Juan Castillo. I am a planner with the Department of Sustainable Development, and I am bringing to you, bringing back, should I say, to you the inclusionary zoning item. We, on our last plan board meeting, we discussed staff's proposal for an inclusionary zoning provision that would require developers to provide affordable housing at 10% with a 30% bonus for 8% AMI, for people that meet the 80% AMI limit. At that meeting, we had discussed some concerns from the plan board members, and so staff has gone back and added some language and some clarification to the proposal, and we're bringing that before you today. So as I mentioned, staff presented the inclusionary zone proposal on our October 27th meeting. Staff also presented the proposal before you on the AHAC November 1st meeting. Comments from that meeting is found in your backup. But for the most part, City Plan Board identified needing more details concerning the organization that will be managing the IC set-asides, a need for options for deeper affordability and an option for a voluntary compliance. And AHAC outlined or made a mention that they wanted the language to be easier as far as the explanation of what inclusionary zoning is and what it entails, in order to reach an audience that may not have the technical savvy of planning lingo, if you will. Of course, they wanted more outreach, which they are currently working on finding 4 locations to where they can show the proposal before you. And of course, they also wanted more details concerning inclusionary zoning. So staff has added, so I'm just kind of quickly go through some of the amendments to the current proposal. We've added definitions to common terms that are not defined in the land development code, such as inclusionary zoning, or what we mean by affordable, etc. We provided further description of the inclusionary zoning process, so things we clarified the fee in lieu of, or at least tried to, the unit type and conditions. We did change the text formatting to better, hopefully make it more understandable and easy to read and comprehend what the information is stating. We provided applicability language, and of course we provided voluntary deeper affordability option, which we can talk a little bit more, but in essence, just a provision where developers, if they so choose to provide more affordability or a combination of affordability and more affordable housing, they will have an option to increase their bonuses, their density bonuses.
Plus, can you maybe they're having trouble hearing in the back because you're far away from the mics.
Oh,
Sorry.
I was wondering why you just sitting there.
And my voice does not carry as much.
He's got a loud voice.
All right. I just stand up over here. So, let's see. What did you guys hear last? So, in essence, just to kind of quickly go through this slide, we've added some additional languages to our original proposal for inclusionary zoning, which goes through some common definitions, terms and definitions. We provided further descriptions of the process for inclusionary zoning. We changed the format so it's easier to understand and read. We provided applicability languages and also provided a deeper affordability provision so that if a developer wants to provide more than the requirement, they would have different bonuses that they can shoot for. So this is what we originally proposed, based on the recommendations from the HRNA report. 10%, a requirement of 10% affordable units for a set for 30% of bonus with 80%, targeting 80% of AMI for people earning 80% of AMI. And so this is the provision for deeper affordability, where a developer would have the option of increasing either 10%, where are you? So basically increasing 10% of AMI, or increasing the amount of units available, and depending on what the developer decides to increase, they can have a 5% increase in the density bonus. And the idea behind the language that is before you is it creates some flexibility for the developer to be able to either provide more affordable units, provide a deeper affordability, and they can play along with those provisions. So you can do more affordable units, waive deeper affordability, or a combination of both. Of course, with the provision, we would need to change the comprehensive plan to boot. We are changing the language in order to allow the comprehensive plan to support deeper affordability and added density bonuses. So the language has changed ever so slightly to allow for a maximum of 50%, 50% additional density bonus. And this also takes into consideration the tree mitigation density bonus that's currently allowed within our land development code. So that's where these numbers, and the full list is found in your backup, but this is just an example as to how that currently looks, the proposal before you. Again, this is just a quick list of the land uses that are being amended in order to allow for the deeper affordability bonuses. We're still amending the density bonus point manual, so we're still proposing the removal of the manual in order to establish the inclusionary zoning as the main bonus, density bonus generator. We're still requiring the 10% affordable housing units, targeting people that make no more than 8% AMI, and have in order as a set up, we'll have 30% density bonus. And this is for developments that are providing 10 units or more. There's still a fee in lieu of language, and that will be required at the market rate per each HUD guidelines. And the units that are provided still need to be comparable to market rate units, which will still be dispersed throughout the development, so as to not all be together in one lump in one area. They need to have the same materials and same services, including parking, amenities, etc. Now I already went through that, and that concludes my presentation. Of course, I'm here and available for any questions that you may have.
Questions for the board for Mr. Castillo?
So what exactly are you asking us to do tonight? Because, and can we get an update on where the workshops and things like that stand that the other committee was gonna hold? Because my thought was that those weren't gonna happen until next year. So we're
Right.
still waiting on more input before you really want us to move forward, correct?
That's correct, and this is, you requested that we bring more language to you that shows that addresses some of the comments and concerns you originally had. So this is our attempt to do that, but of course, we're still working on this.
Yeah.
The AHAC committee is still identifying dates and locations where they're going to have us present the inclusionary zoning proposal. So those are not entirely defined. I believe they're going to be meeting, I forget the date, but it's
Their next meeting is in December here, and then that's where they're going to,
13th, correct?
I think it's the 13th.
Yeah.
That's where they're going to identify the next meeting.
So theoretically, sorry, Mr. Edelton, so theoretically, what you want us to do tonight is look at what you've added based on our discussion the last meeting, and see if there's anything additional, see if we're satisfied with what you've done, and then see if there's anything additional?
That would be great, yes.
Okay, all right.
I have the same concerns about implementation that I did when we saw this before. I don't see an answer there. We still don't have units online, in the city. I think, some of the first projects are sort of coming online, but we don't have this, we don't have an example to go to, and all of those are sort of one-off agreements. So I still really need to know more about how it's gonna work and who's gonna manage this. Because I think it's putting a lot on developers, especially if we stick with the 10 units, which that was one thing I didn't see changed. I might have missed it. But we talked about maybe changing the number of units where this would become required. As far as the size of the development, that it might be harder for smaller developers and smaller projects to handle this. If you were just gonna have one affordable unit, that's a lot of headache and process for one unit versus a bigger complex with 300 units and 30 of them are gonna be affordable. That's something different. So I didn't see that addressed, and then the implementation, I really need to know more about it, because I've been a part of teams trying to figure out these one-off agreements, and it's complicated, and there aren't easy answers, and I don't think we can make something required or take away things like a density bonus and not have a solid working replacement for it. And I don't feel like we have a working solution yet. So the implementation is really important to me. If you can continue to hash that out, and I think the city attorney's office is a piece of that, the housing department's a piece of that, the nonprofits in town are a piece of that. We just need to get people together and sort it out.
Yeah, we clearly need to have some kind of fairly predictable system that allows this whole process to proceed smoothly. Because right now we're doing, as Sutton said, we're doing one-offs. I guess some of them are being managed by the Gainesville Housing Authority.
And the Alachua County.
And some are being done by Alachua County Housing Authority. I don't really require one or the other, but it strikes me that they should probably be operating under the same system in order for this to be approachable from a developer's point of view. It seems like this is going to be a big, it needs to have a system that actually operates in a predictable fashion. And right now I haven't seen that. I didn't see you identify how that would happen. I personally kind of like the idea of finding some nonprofits to do this. I don't think the city is particularly well equipped to add a whole department that does nothing but take care of this issue, but there are a number of nonprofits in the city that, in the county too, that would be readily capable of doing that. In addition to the Gainesville Housing Authority and Alachua County Housing Authority.
So currently the language that is found within the proposal does give developers flexibility to enter into an agreement with an outside agent, so like a organization that makes themselves responsible to fulfill that requirement. And again, we understand that
They don't know what they're doing either, though. You have to be able to pay an attorney to negotiate this for you to do it right now. And it's not an easy thing. There's no template. It's not easy for people. I'm telling you, walking projects through it is not easy, and we need to make it easy. We need a template.
No, we do. It needs to, and it needs to apply evenly to all the developers. I mean, we can't just have different developers having different deals. I don't think that's going to be fair or perceived to be fair.
So I don't know where it's best to hear me, but something that I think would be very valuable for us as staff at this point on the plan board is if there are boundaries or parameters that you all want to be sure are specifically addressed, that we can come back and make sure that we have some sort of feedback for. So I imagine you're thinking of things like who is going to be monitoring, who is going to be enforcing, who is going to be looking at some of these different things.
I'm interested also in where we're going to find people, and how.
What lists are we using?
Yeah, and how that will be managed. I know right now the Gainesville Housing Authority has a list of thousands of people on it, and I just think it's important that we have set criteria for who those people will be, so that it flows smoothly. I do like the idea of somebody like the Gainesville Housing Authority, because they already have an ability to reach people and find out who's looking for housing right now. I also think you need to make sure that there's some system for monitoring. If somebody says, I want to do 30% of AMI or 50% of AMI, that we have a way of dealing with that as opposed to right now, we're less than 80 AMI. And, you know, obviously, we would encourage to go below that. We have to have a system that keeps track of that.
Well, we do, and at least currently, the idea is that there's a requirement that's set, so you have the 10% units for 80% AMI.
Right.
If a developer wants to provide a deeper affordability, we do have currently, the language is that we would increase the density bonuses by 5% based on how much.
And I understand that, but part of the system would be, and I know we do, you know, my experience, I'm on the board of Grace Marketplace, which is rapidly turning itself into a housing agency. And so, you know, if we get a rent that's, they say is 80% AMI, it's highly possible that some nonprofits will contribute to reduce the requirements so that, for instance, the developer gets 80% of AMI, but some nonprofit will subsidize to get it down to 50% of AMI. So, and it's clear that there's a huge demand for people at a lower level than 80% of AMI. And I think the only way we're going to deal with that is to subsidize some of this. And we have to have a system for that.
Yeah, and I think it's more complicated than just the rent price too, right?
Yes,
the
it
AMI
is.
tables account for utilities and, you know, I think we've heard from Sophia at one meeting about all these other fees that these complexes are charging now. And so I think we need a system that's going to be able to catch all of that, right? So we need these agencies to be educated. I would be really curious if staff can reach out to some of these other cities that are doing this and figure out what are the best practices here. Are they doing it internally with city government? Do they have a singular nonprofit partner? What are the best practices here? Because the implementation is the hard part, and we don't want it to go wrong.
We are reaching currently out to some of the cities that we've reached out to, like Boston. There's a couple others but
If there's anything smaller, I think Boston, you know, chances are they're doing it internally, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, when you have a huge city like that, then their city housing authority is probably doing this. But if there's anyone comparable in size, it might be interesting to reach out to them.
And that's what we're running into, is we just see it's just inclusionary zoning normally is market driven, so the provisions and the numbers are all different. And so trying to find something that meets a consensus, or like something that's consistent, that we can kind of extrapolate a formula and apply here is I want to say difficult, but it's taking work. But we are reaching out to other municipalities and trying to see if we can have a system that we can apply here that is more robust.
Well, I mean, this is a really important policy change that we're implementing, and we don't want to screw it up. We want this thing to work and to do what it promises to do. And I think we need to make sure that we just don't throw it out there and hope, you know, ABC developer has to deal with figuring it out, and the incentive to have it not work is far more on the developer side than it is on the city's side, I think.
And I understand the city's hesitation in taking ownership of this, but if you can hire, I don't know if it's 5 or 6 FTEs to go out and inspect rental housing, I think we can hire 1 or 2 FTEs to oversee an important program like this. Even if the tenants are coming through one of the nonprofits and that's your source, and because I think you need someone centrally located in city government that's going to be able to connect planning and the new projects and connect them to the housing and connect them to the legal office for the legal agreements that you need. I don't see how the city makes this function without at least 1 FTE that's going to own it and be that connector, because there's got to be somebody at the city that's gonna enforce this. I don't think it's fair for, the everyday planner that's just reviewing the development plan to have to know all those details. Like, we really need to have an expert in this, because there's a lot of details. They need to follow up, 3 years down the line and see what kind of fees the management companies are tacking on, and make sure that they're falling within the current AMI tables. I really think, it's a great idea to put all this on the nonprofits, but I think if the city wants it to work, the city's gonna have to take some ownership of it. And policies may need to be tweaked over time. I don't see how these one-off agreements and putting so much responsibility on, the individual developers and then multiple housing agencies that may do things differently is gonna create a successful program. So the implementation is my key concern here.
Hooray. Okay. Anybody from the board have any other comments regarding this? Josh is about to explode with comments.
He's just ready to make his first motion.
You keep trying. Well, it's probably gonna be in the bathroom.
At this point, Mr. Castillo, I think we're still just information gathering. Is that accurate?
That's,
Okay.
And that December 13th date for the next Affordable Housing Advisory Committee is correct. It's the 13th at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
That's where some of those dates will hopefully come out of for the next discussion.
Okay, all right.
And you'll let us know. when
And,
those are-
yeah, and are we invited to that?
Yes, and the public is invited, and yes.
Okay. Is that the thing that John Wattel is doing?
Yes.
Okay. Do you require a motion at this point, or you just got notice?
I think I got enough notes.
Yeah, because we're gonna just keep grilling you on this one issue, okay?
Do it.
Okay. Let's see, anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments, Al.
Thanks,
I-
Juan. Sorry, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for.
Are there any comments from the public regarding the pending proposal for inclusionary zoning? Obviously, they will be back again and probably again for a while. But I do think it's an important issue, and I think we're gonna push it through. Okay then, could we have our next petition?
Next one, LD 22-84 ZON, rezoning from PD to MU2. That is CHW Professionals Consultants on behalf of 116 Boulevard LLC. Request for rezoning of property from Planned Development District to Mixed-Use Medium Intensity.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Dan Zhu, a planner with Sustainable Development. I'm presenting LD 22-000084 ZON 16th Boulevard redevelopment rezoning. The subject property is located at 4100 Northwest 16th Boulevard with a size of 0.95 acres. The applicant is requesting rezoning from PD to MU2. The map on the left is the existing zoning PD. The map on the right is the proposed zoning change. The public notices has been sent out to 240 property owners and occupants within 400 feet. No written objection has been received as of today. Staff is recommending approval to this proposal. The applicant's agent is here with us tonight and will be able to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Questions from staff? We don't really know enough at this point. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Chair, good to see y'all again. We do have a presentation. It does touch on a couple of other things, so I will briefly move through it because I do feel like this one's pretty straightforward, so I don't want to overdo anything. The idea here is to take an old, outdated PD, replace it with new current zoning which is consistent with the underlying land use and consistent with everything around it. Kind of, some of the intentions here are that this building has been sitting vacant for some time, and some of the previous PD language was very specific to the uses that came before it. So removing that will encourage reuse and redevelopment of this site. We did hold a neighborhood workshop. We did advertise and send out notifications for it. No one attended this workshop. We have not really received any kind of calls from concerned neighbors either. Here's a map that shows where it is. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the 23rd, 43rd intersection. It's one of the more prominent intersections in town. I myself just live south of here. I'm in one of these two shopping centers quite a bit every week. I would love to see a new use come back into this building. Here's a closer look at the site. There again, it's the entrance. There's office uses to the east, obviously the Fresh Market Shopping Center to where it's located, and then the public shopping center across the street. And of course the theater. Don't want to forget about the theater over there. But there again, it's a focal point. This is where development belongs. So bringing more activity back to this area is a good thing. It's easily accessible by all forms of transportation, bike, walk, automobile. Here's a picture of the vacant building as it sits today. Here's our schedule. We held the neighborhood workshop back in July, made submittal shortly after. We're here tonight at the plan board, and then this, since it is a rezoning, we'll move on to 2 public hearings at the city commission. As staff showed you, and you'll see in these maps, everything around it, it has the same land use, the mixed use medium, including this site. So we're not asking for any change to the land use. All of these are the same. Like I said, this is pretty outdated PD. It's about 27 years old. So the current code and the current comp plan have regulations in place that are a little bit more accurate for the types of development uses that the city wants to see. So we're asking for that implementation. And there again, this will make it consistent with the underlying land use. So there are some requirements, for rezoning. The fact that everything around us has the same land use, including this site, and that we're asking for a zoning district that's the same as everything around us, really checks a lot of the boxes here. The fact that this is in a highly developed area already, and this is encouraging infill, is also helps the consistency with what's required in the land development code. So we ask that you would agree with your professional staff. So recommendation would be what we're seeking this evening, and then we'll take it on to the city commission. But I'll be happy to answer any specific questions that you have.
Questions from the board for Mr. Brochure? I assume at this point you're just looking for zoning, you don't have a project?
That's correct.
In
That's
mind?
one of the things that this will achieve. Like I said, the other conditions in the PD were very specific to uses that came before it, and there's some that's 27 years old since last change. So by opening up the allowed uses with what's consistent with the shopping center and the office park and everything else around it will help facilitate reuse of the site.
Thanks. Any other questions for the petitioner? Seeing none, are there any comments from the public regarding this petition? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for comments or a motion, please.
I move that we approve petition LD 22-84 ZON.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Item, LD 22-129 TCH, certified mail requirement. City of Gainesville, is looking to amendment to the City of Gainesville's Land Development Code to remove language requiring that applicants notify certain affected parties via certified mail when submitting applications that require board review.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the city's plan board. members of the public and staff. I'm Badez Massey. I'm a planner in the city's planning division, which is a part of the Department of Sustainable Development. And tonight I'm here to present a text amendment to Chapter 30, which is the city's land development code. The text amendment, if adopted, would be of impact citywide. It's a legislative matter that will have to be moved forward to the City Commission with your recommendation. It will impact Article 3 of Chapter 30. The first section in Article 3 to be impacted is Section 30-3.7 pertaining to public participation. If you may recall, not too long ago, the city adopted an amendment requiring certified mail be used for notification of neighborhood workshops when development orders involved public hearings. And adjacent property owners had to be notified of neighborhood workshops as well as the public hearing. Tonight, we are recommending that the requirement for certified mail be taken out. There are concerns regarding costs. There are concerns regarding the visibility of the information on the postcards that we sent out being concealed by the documentation that the U.S. Postal Service has to use for certified mail. And of course, there is concern about whether or not, even after incurring cost for sending out certified mail, the intended recipients would even receive it, which would be a loss to the city. So in this section of Article 3, we are proposing that in the second line of this particular code requirement, certified be taken out, and that we insert a new requirement which would require a certified affidavit from the applicant indicating that they have properly notified individuals of the neighborhood workshop. The second section of Article 3 that would be amended is Section 30-3.8 pertaining to public notification. And this is the section which requires that when a development order is being requested and public hearing is required, you have to notify property owners within 400 feet of the subject property. Right now, the code is requiring certified mail to notify those property owners. With this amendment, the requirement for certified mail would be taken out. As we've indicated to you in the backup information, this proposed amendment has already been before the City Commission, and they have asked staff to come to you. So whatever recommendation you decide tonight will go back to the City Commission, hopefully sometime in January, for their consideration and hopefully adoption. So tonight, staff's recommendation on this petition is to approve it. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Massey. Are there any questions from the board for Ms. Massey on eliminating the requirement for certified mail notification? Anybody?
I just have a comment.
You have a comment? Okay.
Well, it's good to see Miss Massey. Thank you
Good
for
to see
joining
you
us.
all.
It's been a
Some of
long
you I've
time.
never seen before.
And I would also just say, this was not in the code amendment when it came through the plan board. This was something that the city commission added when it got to them. So previously, when we voted on this, we did not require certified mail, and I agree with removing the requirement for certified mail. So this was not a plan board initiated item. It's something the city commission did, so.
So you could add, "We told you so."
You add that.
This was not our recommendation previously, and I agree with removing it now.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Massey. Are there any comments from the public regarding removing certified mail?
Sure. Craig Brazier, and as a professional who works with this, and I would 100% agree that this removing it has caused problems that I'm sure weren't intended. Obviously, they didn't see it coming, but while we don't often receive, calls about mundane neighborhood workshop notices we sent out, we were getting very aggravated people asking us why we were sending them certified mail, because if they're not there to sign for it, they don't get it, they gotta go pick
Yeah.
it, you know. It caused a lot of problems, so, they got upset with us, and we were like, oh, it's what we had to do, so, yeah, I would agree.
Thank you. I agree. As a lawyer, I can tell you, we always send things certified mail and by regular mail, because people don't like to get certified mail. And frequently, they don't accept it. So, doesn't matter legally, but nonetheless, if we want actual notification, I think this is a good idea. Ms. Massey, did you have a final comment here? No?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a comment on this petition before we bring it back to the board? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Massey. We'll bring it back to the board for a motion, comments.
You gonna do a motion?
All right, I make
Come on,
a
Phil, certified
motion
mail.
that we approve, is it LD 22-129 TCH?
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, a virgin motion and a section. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
I didn't bring my glasses.
Thank you,
How
Fidesz.
far out?
I'm
If
back.
you like, I can hold it here.
That's the next one, so.
Oh, good. Twice in one night.
LD 22-130 TCH, center line of street setback measurement. City of Gainesville, amendment to the City of Gainesville Land Development Code to remove the center line of street setback measurements.
Ms.
Good
Massey?
evening again, Mr. Chair and members of the City Plan Board audience. This is also a city-initiated petition. It too involves an amendment to Chapter 30, which is the city's land development code. The impacted section would be Article 6. The impact of this amendment, if adopted, would be citywide, and it also is a legislative matter that would have to receive final adoption from the City Commission with your recommendation. The proposal is to take the current Section 30-6.8 of the city's land development code and completely remove it. This section of the code directs staff when reviewing building permits and development plans in cases where property is abutting substandard streets, to measure the front setback from the center line. And it's been in the code for years, many years. And the purpose is to ensure that there is no obstruction, namely buildings, in the path of what could potentially be right-of-way. This code requirement affects the front setback, and it applies when building on substandard streets. And substandard streets are streets that have not been built to the standard width, given the classification of that roadway. For example, a local street is considered to have a width of 50 feet. Many streets within the city, especially the east side of the city, have right-of-way widths that are 30 feet, 40 feet. In cases where you have a proposed development on a lot on those types of standard streets, this code requirement mandates that the front yard setback be based upon a certain distance from the center line to create the point from which the front setback is measured. We have received many complaints from builders and the like about the impact that this has on the city's ability to do things such as create affordable housing in the city, especially on smaller lots where there is not enough depth. Because when you try to achieve this on some smaller lots, it will push the development so far back that there's no room to achieve a rear yard or to achieve a building that's of a size that is affordable ultimately to a potential occupant or buyer. So the recommendation is to remove it completely from the City Land Development Code. And what would have to serve in its absence will be vigilance on the part of staff, namely those involved in development review, to know when it is necessary to make way for the path of new construction, roads that need to be widened to accommodate new features such as sidewalks, bike lanes, new vehicular use lanes. So we will have to do this on our own, because in years past, this particular code requirement would at least give you cause to ask, is this building okay at this setback? Will we need more right-of-way in the future? Are we going to have conflict in the future should we widen this right-of-way because we have allowed a building to be this close? So now it's going to be up to staff to make that call. And so we'll have to be very vigilant in our development plan review to know when there is need to say we need more room, because a year, 2, 5 years down the road, we intend to widen this right-of-way. So the recommendation tonight from staff is to approve it, and this too will go back to the commission for adoption.
Questions for Ms. Massey?
Has Public Works been involved with this at all? Are they aware of this? I imagine they are, but it seems like something that Public Works would like to keep in the code. Or just change and maybe make them a little bit smaller, but Public Works likes to have guidelines like this generally. So I'm just wondering what their thoughts are.
I don't have thoughts from the Public Works Department to give you, but they are aware of it.
I might be able to offer a little bit. They have been a part in the review of this and looking at it, and really today as a part of our development review, especially because staff are so well integrated through our electronic systems and our plan review systems, Public Works and planning all have a lot of different tools that let us achieve correct roadways, correct right-of-ways, correct sidewalk widths based off of really almost site-specific locations. So what we're seeing, like Ms. Massey pointed out, is that in these neighborhoods or areas predominantly on the east side of town that often are, you know, at the end of streets or old subdivisions that maybe were platted over time or over decades really strangely, that this allows us to continue to have really orderly development of these streets with the tools that we have today and not be beholden to lines that were drawn on plats or center lines from decades and decades ago. That really largely this is code that's driven that really has buildings and housing more subject to roads. And we've really switched that mentality through our code and our comprehensive plan at the city over time, where roads and utilities are more subordinate to housing and other services that we're providing.
So that opens up sort of what my second question was, is whether GRU has been a part of this conversation or not. And it sounds like it's coming mostly out of the building permit process. That's where these problems are coming from. And GRU isn't always fully involved in building permits. So say there was a water line at the front of a property that should really have an easement over it per se, and maybe not have a building within 10 feet of it. How has GRU been involved, and have we talked about how maybe we need to bring them into some of the building permit reviews if we take this away to be sure that we're not impacting utilities?
Do you want to answer, Fidesz, or I'm happy to answer?
They are involved in the development review process, Public Works, GRU. We have a host of city departments, and sometimes even we have county representatives involved when necessary, and We will even call on the state when necessary. With this requirement being removed, it's going to be incumbent upon us as staff to know when we need to use good judgment in terms of recommending or enforcing setbacks. It would be helpful. I mean, years ago, when there was a technical review committee, we had guidance with plans that told us these are the roadways that are scheduled for future widening. So in addition to having this code requirement, we did have the Public Works Department helping us, not just for local roads, but for county roads and state roads, when there were plans to widen roadways. And we would be able to tell developers, this is what the zoning district allows, but you're going to need to come back a little bit further because this right-of-way is scheduled for improvements in the next year or two. So in the absence of this section of the code, that's what we're going to have to do unless the commission or staff comes up with different verbiage.
I think that's putting a lot of responsibility on independent planners and reviewers. Particularly, I think my concern is, and I understand all of the GRU departments are involved in development plan review, but I'm not sure that all of the GRU departments, like particularly real estate, who handles their easements and when they're needed, is involved with a building permit application. Okay, so GRU real estate is reviewing building permit applications and asking for easements when they're needed.
Yes.
Okay. That takes away some of my concerns then. I think we just have to be really careful when we're reducing setbacks and also talking about, you know, concurrently, and it remains to be seen whether it'll be implemented, but increasing density significantly to the point that we're going to need to improve infrastructure in some of these roads. I think we need to be careful to preserve enough space to improve the infrastructure to support higher density in these older neighborhoods. And I understand maybe reducing this a little bit, but it makes me nervous to take it out entirely, to be honest. But if you all feel like all of the departments that are necessary are involved and, you know, we can get by with these, you know, small setbacks and still have room for adding the transformers and upgrading the water lines and sewer lines that are going to be needed in some of these neighborhoods to increase the density. You know, I think that's one of my big concerns about the exclusionary zoning issues, as I've said before, is that we're not thinking big picture. And so when you have more density, there's need for that infrastructure. There's need to have right-of-way, add sidewalks, add bike lanes, because you're putting more density in these neighborhoods. And so I do have some concerns about this, but if staff is comfortable.
I'm assuming these are in areas that already have small lots, which means.
Well, it would be anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
I guess
getting rid of
would
it
be
in all
anywhere.
zoning
Well,
districts.
let me ask you this, Ms. Massey. Currently, is this law widely implemented? Is it implemented automatically? Or does staff?
It should be.
Are there waivers for it?
There are no waivers,
Okay,
but it should be implemented.
okay.
I mean, it's been in the land development code, just to give you.
Well, that was my
I know
question,
since
is if there was
1990.
some system that allowed us to modify it as you went along. And what you're saying is currently there's not.
No, and it's been in the code, I know, since 1990, and probably pre-1990.
So, I want to ask staff one more question. And I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you all. In new subdivisions, what is the minimum right-of-way width that you're seeing that allows all the utilities, that allows all the sidewalks and everything else that's needed in the right-of-way? What's the minimum width that you've seen in new subdivision?
I would have to ask our public works staff for what they're requiring, and I assume you mean single-family subdivision.
Single family.
Yeah, I would have to look that number up and ask our public works staff.
Okay, because I would say, depending on how you do the PUEs, if you're putting some of the utility easement on the lot or not, really, it's hard to get away with less than 50. and get everything that the city code requires. And so the fact that like all other streets and local streets are 25, like in reality, when you design them, you need that. That's my concern here, is when you design a street, you need that if you want to have the travel lanes and sidewalks and all of the utilities that you need. So I just worry a little bit about taking that away. And maybe the highways and arterials don't need to be that. You know, I understand, like, you know, we want buildings up to University Avenue. We want, like, but I would feel more comfortable if we left, like, just a minimum in here. Like, maybe it's a minimum of 25 feet, because we know that you can do a local street, at least, with sidewalks and the utilities that you need with a 50-foot right-of-way. But
So certainly part of this is the confusion of how it is measured at all. And I don't know, Des, if you want to talk through that or have a slide
Yeah,
or
I can
anything.
explain. For example, on a local street, where it says all other streets, the standard width is 50 feet. So if someone's building a house on a local street and the actual right-of-way width is 30 feet, what you're going to do is make up the difference between that 30 feet and the 50. That's 20 feet. So what happens is, on both sides of the center line of that 30-foot right-of-way, you've got a difference of 10 feet on one side and 10 feet on the other. So you've got, from the center line, you have to measure, you've got 30 feet and then another 10 feet. And it's where that 10-foot marker stops that you begin measuring the front setback. Now, how deep your lot is will determine how much you have left over to build a house.
But that 10 feet is exactly where we want, like, sidewalks and street trees to go.
That's correct.
Right? When
That's-
we're redeveloping these
that's
things, we
correct.
want to be adding the sidewalks and the street trees and the infrastructure like we require now. And so if we don't require the space for sidewalks and street trees and bike lanes or whatever else, we're not going to get them.
So we're achieving those on some other projects with easements, you know, beyond the right-of-way, where the public access easements are required for those sidewalks on private property, outside of right-of-way. So we use other tools, both for public works and for GRU, that allow the rights, or the property rights for the land, without needing specific measurements from center lines of streets, or the additions of the setbacks from substandard streets. What we're really seeing is on these smaller lots is that, in effect, this is an additional setback, where, you know, as you all have seen for transect zones, you know, even very large buildings on smaller streets, that they have the 555. That's 15 feet from back of curb. We're talking about 25 feet, you know, in these cases from the center line.
From
And
the
then we're
center line,
talking
which
about-
gives you a travel lane, a sidewalk, a street tree.
And then we're
I
talking
mean,
about
that's what our code calls
the
for.
setback in addition to that. So if it's a single-family house for housing, you're looking at that 20-foot setback, depending on the zoning, of course, you know, roughly for a single-family house, in addition to depending on this setback from the streets.
I don't think I would have the same level of concern if we weren't also talking about not just having single-family homes in all these places, right? That these could become quadruplexes and need a new transformer and need all of these other things that we generally try to put in the right of way. More cleanouts, more water meters, I mean, you name it. When you increase the density, more things go in the right of way. So that's my concern, is that personally, I'd be interested in a little bit more input and feedback from Public Works on this, because those streets are tight, and even the newly designed, you know, greenfield development at 50 feet, it's tight to get everything you need in there. And so redevelopment's even harder, and things aren't always exactly where you think the water and the sewer line are gonna be, and there's a stormwater pipe, and so I agree with the idea of like reducing this, but I don't know that I'm comfortable with removing it entirely. That's just where I stand. Other people may not care. Other people, don't engineer projects and don't have to think about all these things, but. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak
Well,
to this.
Does somebody else want to speak?
I was just gonna ask if there was thought given to reducing it. It seems like it's an all or nothing thing with us right now.
Well, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
You can't.
I know, I can't do it.
Where did this start? It looks like some citizens maybe had a problem with a proposed project or something.
It started at the city commission. Citizens went to the city commission, and so the city commission referred the matter to the city planning.
And where we've seen this come up 2, 3, maybe 4 times now is for Habitat for Humanity houses. They've been unable to fit Habitat for Humanity houses on the lots that they have available to them. And some of them are lots that they have entered into agreements with the city to have the rights to or ownership of.
So the other thing I would be open to and maybe encourage is like allowing a variance for this, but having to prove that you need the variance and go through that process and check all those boxes. I think we should, personally, I would keep a minimum and then allow a variance if they can justify it to the DRB and meet the criteria for variance. That's my thought.
And staff's position is they can manage this without this ordinance.
Yes, that we can protect the goals of the comp plan and the intent of the land development code without these sections.
Any other questions for Ms. Massey?
I'm curious about equity-related impacts to this. I'm curious like where substandard lots are, where substandard streets are, and where like small lots are, like the areas you would be targeting.
The substandard streets can be anywhere within the city.
Mm-hmm.
They're everywhere.
Do you have a map of that, for example?
I wish I did. That would be of help to staff to know where these streets are.
Okay.
They may have a map of that type in the Public Works Department, I'm not sure. I can't speak on behalf of the Public Works Department.
Mm-hmm.
But substandard streets are everywhere.
They are. I mean, if you drive anywhere in
Yeah.
the core of the city, Oakview, any of those places, the streets are very narrow. Certainly on Pleasant Street, all those, they have really, really narrow streets. So I suspect they are all over the place. I live on a street that's only 30 feet wide and unpaved. Could you fix that? No, I'm just kidding. We don't want to pave. But I mean, I think there are a lot of substandard streets, and I understand the issue of trying to make some small lots buildable, and I understand that requiring big setbacks into a small lot pretty much it does 2 things. One, it increases the expense. You either have to build up or do something else, or it makes a piece of property unbuildable, and that's certainly something that we don't want to have within the city limits, mostly. So anyway, is there any comment from the public about eliminating this requirement? Apparently not.
You guys are more interested
Thank
there.
you. I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Massey.
You're
Bring it back to the board for additional discussion or a motion, please.
I'm feeling like we're kind of on the page of not eliminating it entirely and keeping at least some minimum. Would you say a minimum of all A through D or just like C and D?
I would be fine with just a minimum and even allowing a variance to it. I think that's fine, but I think getting rid of protecting right-of-way altogether, like there's a reason why we need right-of-way. And, when you go into these substandard streets, if you want to, improve the utilities or improve the roadway itself, if you want to add sidewalks, bike lanes, anything like that, there's challenges. I mean, even where the city has tried to go back into some of these streets with the narrow right of way and do these bike boulevards, like, wouldn't it be great if we had the space to like actually have a like concrete divider between the bike lane and the street? I mean, like,
Well, in
we're
some
calling
ways,
it a
but-
bike boulevard, but really it's just green painted on the street and it's still a narrow street, so.
I bike down the bike boulevard every day. Like, I pick up my kids and I go down 12th Street every day. And having a narrow road that acts as a natural thing for slowing cars down, it works great on those kinds of streets.
Well, and I don't think it's real, I mean, the substandard streets are normally residential neighborhoods, and there isn't normally, huge amounts of traffic going through it. Bicycles can go. I'm not sure that it.
And that's why I think like one minimum here is probably fun. Like, let's just think about what that minimum is. But if the city's gonna invest in a streetway improvement project, which they do, and they wanna go in and add sidewalks and street trees, they're gonna need the space to do that. If they want to make it, within neighborhoods and it's been years, but we did a sidewalk project in Porters, and you needed to have the space for the sidewalk next to the street, and you added it to this substandard street, but it provided a safe walkway for people to get from Porters to downtown. So I think there's amenities that can be added when you have the space for them.
I would just narrow the street at that point.
Well, if it's already, not wide enough to meet
Well,
current
that's-
standards.
Okay.
You can have real narrow streets. They
I
don't have to
think
be
adding
25
minimum
feet.
in the variance gets the
Well,
job
but-
done. It says the same thing, but allowing us to still have control. You're not doing away with it altogether.
Well, of course, a narrow street automatically slows down the traffic or makes people avoid it altogether.
Right.
I mean, one of the problems with University and 13th Street is they're built for cars to go 50 miles an hour, and they do. And that's
I was
a big
thinking that
problem.
this morning, because I bike on Northeast 7th Street, and I cross University there. I'm like, why do we have a highway in the middle of our city where
Yeah.
people are going 60 miles an hour, and I've got a child on the back of my bicycle? I mean, there's no reason for people going 60, 70 miles an hour there, and it being that wide, that encourages that.
No, it absolutely does. Okay.
That's not.
Anybody like to take a run at a motion on this issue?
Mr. Chair, if I might, just to offer, if it looks like we're going to a minimum, if I might suggest having Public Works and GRU staff come in to give some of that feedback, what a reasonable minimum is, or whether or not there are other tools that we use to achieve the same goal. That's my suggestion.
That would be fine. Can we defer this to next month then and have that? Okay, anybody want to make a motion to defer until next month? Ms. Massey?
Whatever the wishes of the board, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
We're willing to do what we need to do to help.
Okay, I'll make a motion to defer LD 22-130 TCH to the January Plan Board meeting, giving staff direction to work with Public Works and GRU on what a reasonable minimum would be, and also drafting language to allow a variance to this.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll see you in January.
Thank you.
Mr. Castillo.
Petition LD 22-80 SUP to allow 10 fueling positions. CHW professional consultants on behalf of Thomas R. Bolton, Robert R. and Cheryl G. Rella. Request for a special use permit to allow an additional 6 fueling positions, or 3 pumps, for a total of 10 fueling positions.
Ms. Sue, you ready?
So I come to one.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Dan Zhu, a planner with Sustainable Development. I'm presenting LD 22-00080 SUP Northeast 16th Avenue redevelopment special use permit for a gas station. Here is a brief timeline. The first staff meeting was in March. The neighborhood workshop was in May. The mail notices were sent out and the sign were posted twice. The subject property is located at the intersection of Northeast 16th Avenue and North Main Street with a size of 1.29 acres. There are 4 parcels involved. Parcel 1, 2, 3, and 4. Within the site we have Wood U Furniture Store, Sandwich Inn. Nearby the site we have UF Health, Tire Depot, T-Mobile, Direct Auto Insurance, and Circle K. The applicant is requesting a special use permit for 10 fueling stations with 5 pumps. The subject property is currently in Zone BUS with future land use of commercial. Now let's take a look at the site plan. Here are the pedestrian access points. And here are the vehicle access points. This is the location of the proposed pumps. And this is the proposed convenience store. On this slide, we have the elevations for the convenience store. The public notices were sent out to 50 property owners and occupants within 400 feet of the subject property. No written objection has been received as of today. So a brief staff analysis. This proposal will not adversely affect the public interest. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan and also compatible with land uses in the surrounding areas. Therefore, staff is recommending approval with conditions. Please refer to the staff report for details, and the applicant is here with us tonight and will be able to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Board members, Ryan Thompson with CHW, agent for the applicant. Welcome new board members. I'm here to share a little bit more information about LD 22-80 SUP, the special use permit for redevelopment on Main Street and 16th Avenue. We did hold a public workshop. On the left is the memorandum that went out to neighbors within 400 feet and the notice that was published in the newspaper. We did have one attendee that lived adjacent to the property. He was excited to see redevelopment in the area that hasn't existed in a long time. He didn't have any objections to the property being redeveloped. We have not heard from any other neighbors. The request is for a special use permit consistent with the city's BUS zoning district, permitted uses and development standards with the intent to redevelop the site with the fueling station and convenience store and restaurant. This is the timeline that we've held. As Ms. Zhu illustrated, we have followed the city's process for the SUP application. This is the project site context aerial with the main arteries of Main Street and 16th Avenue highlighted here. These are uses in the area. Main Street's predominantly commercial, auto-oriented uses. The city does have the multi-use path for 6th Street with plans to continue that north, as well as an east-west connector along 16th Avenue that we'll be incorporating along our project's frontage with the redevelopment of the site. This is a close-up of the project site. As you can see, well, pardon me, that's coming. So existing uses are a wood furniture store and a sandwich shop, and to the north is UF Health. Along the right, which is to the east, is Northeast 2nd Street. That's a right-of-way that's held by the city of Gainesville. And as you'll see in the site plan, we are proposing a connection to that as well at the request of Public Works. And that may serve as cross-access if the property to the east redevelops in the future. The future land use on the site is commercial. There's no change request to that. The proposed use is permitted by right with use-specific standard criteria in section 30-5.14. Again, the zoning is BUS on the site, and we're not requesting a change to that either. And I do want to emphasize that the fueling station is permitted by right. Our special use permit request is for the additional fuel pumps. That discourages multiple fuel stations in different areas by enhancing the opportunity here. And the fuel station is more than just selling fuel. As a convenience store, I'll have 2 restaurants. It'll have spaces for electric vehicles, an opportunity for that. So I just wanted to emphasize part of the uses that are included in how the site will redevelop. Looking at the existing conditions, so very typical in what you see from older development. There are wider side driveways. On the south along 16th, you can see that there's kind of a very wide driveway that should be 2, but is not. With the site's redevelopment, we'll be reducing the 2 driveways on Main Street down to 1. Then on 16th Avenue, we'll have 1 driveway that'll be a right in, right out, and then the driveway access to 2nd, as I described before. To illustrate that, these are our access points. The existing sidewalks on Main Street and 16th Avenue, and as I alluded to, along 16th, we'll be widening that sidewalk to at least 10 feet to assist the city in implementing that east-west multi-use path. Sidewalks will connect to the building to the right-of-way as well as the parking areas. The building entrances will be both internal to the site and facing 16th Avenue. There will be bike parking adjacent to the building and space allocated for charging stations for EVs, electric vehicles. The dumpster is located to the rear of the site. And landscaping will be both to the side and rear to screen the use, as well as enhance the landscaping along those corridors. This is a rendering of that that looks more attractive than the site plan that you were looking at before. Oops. I just wanted to walk through some of the criteria specific to fueling stations. So the fuel canopy is located to the rear. We did face 16th Avenue with the broad side of the building to screen the canopy to the greatest extent possible. And also placing or orienting the narrow side of the canopy towards Main Street. So really to make this as discreet as possible. The fuel pumps are located much greater than 15 feet from the right-of-way and property lines that's required by code. We have reduced the driveways, as I mentioned before. The east driveway, as I mentioned, may serve as cross-access in the future if those sites redevelop. The front facade has a glazing of 53%. That's actually twice as much as what's required by code. And then 37% along the Main Street corridor. Again, we brought the building up to the street. That reduces pedestrian conflicts with vehicles. It's not required by code, being that this isn't a transect zone, but we think that that's the right thing to do. There is no parking in front of the building for that same reason. The canopy will not exceed 15 feet. I mentioned the perimeter buffers, so you can see the landscaping that'll be at the corner of the intersection as long as along both corridors and to the rear of the site. And there's no car wash proposed. And the convenience store is estimated to be about 4,600 square feet and will include a restaurant, possibly 2 restaurants, and also retail service. On the left, you'll see the existing conditions of the site. The rendering on the right hand, you can see that there's the building brought up to the street with landscaping and sidewalks and the fuel canopy to the rear. This is a little better view of that image here. The SUP application is consistent with the comprehensive plan, specifically the future land use element Code 1, as well as the transportation mobility element policy 10.1.4. And the special use permit review criteria, section 30-3.24, and the use specific standards in section 30-5.14, as I mentioned. So staff has reviewed the application. They find it consistent with the comprehensive plan and land development code. It is compatible with adjacent uses. It's an appropriate location for a fueling station with the amount of traffic and the adjacent uses. And we are in agreement with the 3 conditions staff's proposed in the staff report. With that, I conclude.
Questions for petitioner?
Do you know what kind of electric vehicle charging you're going to have? Is it going to be Tesla, CCS, J1772?
At this stage, being that we're just seeking the special use permit, we're not that far along yet. That's still being discussed. It is a national tenant that is doing that research, and that will be determined. We're ensuring that there's space allocated for that. And I believe there's either 4 or 5 spaces that will be allocated for that.
And power to it, I guess.
Yes.
I have a question on siting of the building. How did you determine that it should face Northeast 16th as opposed to Main Street?
We went through about 12 different iterations of the site, and I think what really sold it for us was Public Works' request for us to widen that multi-use path, knowing that pedestrians would predominantly be coming from 16th Avenue. We brought the building closest to 16th Avenue and thought, it would be best for that location. Really, the purpose of bringing the building forward is to protect pedestrians, and we thought that it would serve it best on 16th.
Yeah, the result of the design is we end up with parking along Main Street, which is clearly not a policy that the city encourages along major thoroughfares. So that's what I guess if I have an issue at all, is that the building should be facing Main Street or perhaps facing the corner the way the building across the street at Circle K does.
We did set it back quite a ways. You'll note that the Circle K really doesn't have a convenient public entrance, even though it kind of sits more towards the corner. So we are addressing that issue. We have shifted the building and associated parking to the east to ensure that there's sufficient area for landscaping to be able to screen that parking, and we've really minimized the amount of parking that we've located on that side. I do understand your concern, and we can address that with additional landscaping.
I think 16th is more pedestrian friendly there too, because it's only 2 lanes at that point, or 3 with the turning lane, and Main Street is 4 lanes there.
It is
5 with the turning lane.
correct.
So
What are the city street classifications though? Which one would be considered the more primary
Yeah.
street? Does anybody, maybe Danzu, do you know what the street classifications are? Because I would just guess that Main Street is the more primary street when you look at the street labeling.
And we did find
Right,
it
you're
very
shaking
challenging to orient a long building with the geometry of that site and have the driveway on Main Street as well. It just geometrically doesn't fit very well.
Yeah, I'm interested in what the street types are and what staff's thought is orienting the building to the non-primary street, because I'm fairly certain somewhere in the code it requires that buildings
It
be
does.
oriented to the more primary street. I understand the pedestrian, feel of 16th, but if the code says you have to orient to the primary street, then we need to have a conversation about that.
So according to our database, Main Street, they're considered a principal street, but it ends right at Northeast 16th Avenue. So just right ends there. And then there are no street types for Northeast 16th Avenue and the north portion of the Main Street.
That's curious.
It becomes a highway there.
And I do want to go back to comments that I made earlier about trying to screen that canopy to the greatest extent practicable, having the narrow side of that canopy facing Main Street and then the broad side of the building shielding it from 16th Avenue. Helps with that as well.
I think one minor concern I had was were people making left turns off of eastbound 16th? Because I know you designed it so that's a right in, right out, but people still try to turn into that, and it'll obstruct traffic because 16s are one lane both directions.
Yeah. So
area.
there will be improvements to 2nd Street. Yes. That vehicles will be encouraged to come out there and take a left or left in. I think once people get the feel of it, it'll be just as easy to do that than it will be to try to cut in there. There will be signage and markings to discourage people from doing that. Because of the fuel truck, we imagine it'll be coming north on Main Street and turning into the site and then wrapping around the site and exiting to go west on 16th, and we really need that right out for the fuel truck to maneuver correctly versus going out to 2nd and then making that U-turn to make the movement onto 16th. So it's really a function for the fuel vehicle. They'll be making deliveries than for regular vehicles.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Can you bring up the layout just one more time? Because you're saying there may be 2 restaurants in addition to sort of a retail convenience use. Where are you planning on the other trucks, like a loading zone being here? Where would a delivery truck go?
This is when I wish I had my engineer with me. They would probably go either along the north and have to come across. They could temporarily be located along the east side where the EV vehicles are. That is a detail that we'll work out during the site plan application.
Could you walk me through again, how the fueling truck you imagine is going to go through the site now that we have the layout out? I didn't follow your
Sure.
explanation.
Yeah, I apologize. So if I may point to the board because I don't have fancy animation.
That'll help though. You can just draw it out with your finger.
Yeah. So imagine the vehicle will come here and then load, or unload in this case rather, and then just follow straight down and turn out to leave the site. These are really big trucks.
Yeah.
So to make this turn is challenging, let alone have to make this turn, and then this turn, and then this turn. So it's really almost impossible for the truck to be able to make that maneuver. We're able to test this in AutoCAD with the software called AutoTurn with a sufficient type truck, and we tried to make it work, and it's just really challenging. So that right in, right out really does help for that truck.
But your concern, your initial concern was about just everyday vehicles
Yeah.
backing up traffic
Yeah.
on 16th, making that left turn into that, into the lot there.
Yeah, like turning from like here into this right.
Which they absolutely will do.
Yeah.
And would back up traffic there.
Yeah, so maybe some like light median over here, like some slightly raised median that a truck could clear, but not like a car, for example, like as like a traffic safety improvement in that area. I don't know.
Okay.
Or simply a left, if you're gonna try and encourage people to take second, you probably should add a left turn lane on second so that people are going that way without backing up.
If you all get this approval for 10 pumps, you'll definitely have to do a traffic study and highlight what
Correct.
those
We will.
necessary safety
Absolutely.
improvements would be. Like a traffic engineer would determine that.
Yes, yes, they'll work that out with city staff. And we already have to some extent, but understanding that it's a special use permit problem stage. Thank you for those observations.
Any public health concerns about putting a gas station right next to a prominent doctor's office and healthcare facility?
Not any more than the Wendy's that's already.
I guess not, but the Wendy's doesn't have,
Yeah, I mean, I can't vote for this. I mean, but they can do by right a certain amount of pumps.
Yeah.
But me personally, like any expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure, I'm like against. By right, you can do what you can do, but I'm not for approving more than what you can do by right. That's just me, but you guys can vote how you want.
I understand that philosophy. I think it does help to have fewer stations with more pumps, though. It cuts down on the number of pumps to meet the same demand.
I mean, there's a station across the street.
I understand that.
it's not necessarily an area.
I mean, I live less than a mile from here. I don't want more gas stations near me, so, I mean.
Understood.
But also, yeah, like.
I think to Bob's point, it would be a lot more interesting to see the building closer to the corner. I understand fronting 16th and we don't have a better street designation on Main that we can make you face Main. But I think being more oriented at the corner, we have a gas station across the street that's oriented to the corner. You know, and I understand, you know, you've got landscape there and you wanna screen the canopy, but just having you know, that parking there rather than like to the rear of the building, it's really at the front of the site. And I know you're calling it the side of the building, but it's the front of the site has double loaded row parking. And I'm not crazy about that.
I understand. And it's a product of the geometry of the site.
And
It honestly
yeah, I mean, I
is.
can
That's where we started.
Picture the auto turn.
And
I can
12 iterations later, this is where we are.
It's tricky.
More questions of the applicant? Then we'll open it to public comment. If anybody from the audience has a comment on this project?
There's a lot of people here.
You're a quiet bunch tonight.
Yeah, got a lot of people, no comments, what's up?
Then I guess we'll bring it back to the board and look for a motion.
I'm not in love with the design. I mean, I understand how you got here, and I understand there's probably limited options, but I'm not in love with the design. And I think the loading is a question for me. I think like you know, you've sort of put some of your like back of house with the dumpsters up in the corner and the unloading up in the corner. But you just have this like bay of parking essentially at the front. And I don't know, I'm not in love with it. I think we've pushed you all before to come up with better design, and you usually come back with something better. And so I'm tempted.
We push ourselves as well.
Yes, so I'm tempted to just try to give you some direction and see what better you can do. And I'd love to hear, I think we know where Josh stands, I'd love to hear where other people stand and if they have feedback on the layout or any other thoughts, but.
As you know, I've already raised the issue. I do not like having the side of the building face Main Street with 2 rows of parking. I just think, even though we haven't got a specific designation as the primary, it's clear that Main Street is the primary street vis-a-vis Northeast 16th. And I think you could, now I'm not talking about how you design the site, but you could accommodate the pedestrian-friendly part of it by moving it to the corner, and it would be pedestrian-friendly to both streets. And the screening of the pumps, I'm not even sure how effective that is, but I don't think that's more important than having the site basically face the primary street, which is called Main Street.
Well, and there's this, there's just potential for redevelopment, like across the street I see too. There hasn't been much in this area, right? So thinking about what is this gonna look like in 10 or 15 years, and are we gonna wish that this building faced Main Street? I think so. I think we're gonna wish that it faced Main Street, and right north of it, the UF Health building does a good job of facing Main Street. Love or hate the, outside decor of that building, but it very clearly faces Main Street. And so I don't know, I would like to push you all to try to bring something back that's better on the Main Street side and come back to us.
To your point too, having that building on the corner allows for the trucks to maneuver in for food deliveries as well.
We're not trying to design your site in the sense of where the trucks go, but I think we are trying to design, once you build a building, it's going to be there for 25, 30 years. And it's clear the policy of the city has been that buildings face the primary street, and I think Main Street is clearly the primary street of this intersection. So I would be in favor of letting you take another swing at it, but that's up to you.
We would like another opportunity to be before you and present something better. Thank you.
Should we continue to January, or is that too soon?
Is January enough time? Do you want a time certain, or what would you guys like?
January, please.
Somebody make a motion to do that, please.
I'll make a motion to continue petition LD 22-80 SUP to the January meeting, with a sidebar that I'd like for staff to also look at the street designations in this area, because I find it curious that our street designation for Main Street ends here. Like, it's very clearly continuing to be like a principal street north of this. I don't think that it should be considered a local street there, which is what it defaults to if it doesn't have a label. So with a sidebar, maybe staff can look at these streets a little bit more.
It gets bigger at that point.
Yeah, no, it becomes a highway.
So it's really interesting to me that, the designation goes away there. If staff can look at that and bring it back to us. But continuing the item to January.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of continuing this item until January meeting?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay. You know it was coming.
Yeah, well, you got it.
Thank you all for your feedback. We
We'll
appreciate
see you
it.
back
We'll
Thanks,
see you in
Ryan.
January.
Yeah. Mr. Castillo.
change our city logo.
LD 22-00002 has been continued to February. So we're moving on to LD 22-118 SUP Redemption Orthodox Presbyterian Church. Special use permit with development plan review to allow a place of religious assembly at the construction of the construction of a pavilion with a fence. Zone is single family RSF1 and public services and operations, located at 4820 Northwest 34th Street.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the City Plan Board. Again, I'm Des Massey with the city's Planning Division. This is a request for a special use permit for a place of religious assembly, and there is an associated development plan. The development plan is provided to the board as a courtesy so that you can see the layout of the development site and the proposed construction. The review of the development plan will be totally done administratively. However, it was submitted with a special use permit so that you would have a visual to be able to determine how the applicant's request is consistent with the criteria for receiving a special use permit and what the construction of the pavilion entails. The subject property is around 2.2 acres. It is occupied by an existing church. The church has housed many places of religious assembly. It is also occupied to the south by a utility building. Consequently, in the early 1980s, the property received 2 zoning designations and 2 land use designations. Currently, the northern portion of the subject property has an RSF1, or residential single-family zoning designation, and the southern portion, where the utility building is located, has a Public Services and Operations, or PS, zoning designation. The land use designation to the north is single-family, and on the southern portion of the subject property, the land use designation is PF, or Public and Institutional Facilities. Surrounding the development site is primarily single-family residential development. Immediately to the north is the Northwood Pines Shopping Center, and that land area has a mixed-use low zoning designation and a mixed-use low land use designation. The next slide shows you a visual of the proposed development plan, which is part of the building permit application, also on file with the city for the construction of a pavilion that will be around 960 square feet, 1 story in height, and proposed on the east side of the development site. I don't have a pointer, but I'm going to step from the podium and sort of help you get better oriented as far as where the site is. I've had long conversations with the Public Works Department and FDOT about where 34th Street ends and 34th Boulevard begins.
It's right in the middle of the curve.
Yeah.
Right around here.
Yeah. After several conversations, emails, and also on-site visits, it has been determined that Northwest 34th Street ends at this point. And from this point north is Northwest 34th Boulevard. There is still some discussion about the name of this local street, but the signage currently on site shows that this is called Northwest 34th Street. And to the north, as you can see, is Northwest 49th Avenue. So to address the property, we sought the help of Gainesville Fire Rescue. So the site has a Northwest 34th Street 911, E911 address. So all of our notices and public notice was sent out with this property having the correct E911 address. In case you were wondering, it's 34th Street. So we had to tell the applicant, you're now going to have to change all of your letterhead. Shown in blue is the proposed pavilion. Right now, the church has outdoor picnic tables and for seating at this location. This request is for a special use permit to establish a place of religious assembly as a legitimate use on this property in the RSF1 zoning district, because as many of you probably know, there have been many churches here, but we could not find evidence that one, a special use permit had been issued to the last church that was there, and if it had not expired before the 12-month period that the code gives a special use permit. A special use permit, once issued, is good. It runs with the land, unless the applicant does not act on the building permit that's been issued, or the order that's been issued for the property over a period of time, or the property is abandoned and nothing else goes there to honor that special use permit. So in the absence of that documentation, that evidence, the applicant was told at the time that they filed for the building permit that they also had to apply for a special use permit before the plan board to proceed. And here they are.
Okay.
Does everyone understand? Also to be considered is that in the RSF1 zoning district, places of religious assembly which are permitted by special use permit are subject to special setbacks. So in choosing the front property line for this site, and as you can tell, it's one of those unusual sites because it has street frontage on every side. So the code says that when you apply for a building permit, the property owner has the ability to choose where the front property line is, provided that that choice doesn't make the site non-conforming. And what the applicant has chosen is a front property line along Northwest 34th Boulevard. And what that does is it allows them to meet a rear yard setback churches have to comply with, that's 50 feet. 50 feet. And they have 88 feet from the closest point of the existing church to the 34th Street right of way. The north property line along Northwest 49th Avenue becomes a street side that's subject to a setback of 25 feet. And from this point where the property is zoned PS and has a PF land use designation, that setback, although there is no setback because the setbacks are along the lot line, at this point on their development site, they are subject to the requirements of the ordinance that rezoned this piece to PS. Everything else that occurs from this point north, and there's about a 200-foot distance from this point north to where the land or the subject property has a PS zoning district. So from this point north, which is on RSF1, they are subject to the requirements of the RSF1 zoning district. Any questions at this point about how we got to where we are now in our discussion? Any questions about the pavilion? And I will note that the pavilion has been placed out of what will be the front yard setback, because the city also has requirements as to where accessory uses and accessory structures can be placed. This is a slide showing you that the property was properly posted. This is the east side. You can see Northwest 34th Boulevard. As you all know, Northwest 34th Boulevard was improved not too long ago. There used to be a swale here before this retaining wall, so that impacted the applicant's property somewhat with the improvements that you see now. There's a sidewalk that runs along 34th Boulevard. Also to be discussed when we talk about later on in staff's discussion, certain requirements that will apply to this site. Also, you can see that the sign notifying the public about the intent to apply for a special use permit. There were actually 2 signs posted on this property because it's so large. On this side and also on the west side facing the residential development. There's the sign again. You can see on the east side of the property some picnic tables that are there. And now we see the review criteria, criteria that staff has to determine that the applicant meets. And we have determined that they meet the criteria for receiving a special use permit, but in reviewing this criteria, we've recommended 2 conditions. And we've identified those conditions in the staff report. Our recommendation is to approve this petition for request for a special use permit with the conditions identified in your staff report, and I'd just like to briefly discuss what they are. The first condition is that with the approval of the special use permit, the applicant will have to be subject to receiving a development plan approval that's filed with the city under a building permit number. Because there are other requirements that the construction of the pavilion will be subject to. The pavilion has been reviewed by the Building Inspections Division, GRU, other members of our review team. So as a condition of the special use permit, they will have to complete that process and comply with the requirements or conditions of those other reviewing departments. Plus the conditions associated with the special use permit. And the second recommended condition is that currently on the property, on the north side, the church has a solid waste collection container on 49th Avenue that does not meet the city's current screening requirements. So as a condition of receiving a special use permit, we are recommending to the board that they screen that container. It's highly visible from both Northwest 34th Boulevard, Northwest 49th Avenue, and the adjacent residential neighborhood to the west. If you noticed in the staff report, there was some mention of sidewalks, and I'm sure all of you are wondering, will they be subject to meeting the city's sidewalk requirements? And what we know now about the sidewalk requirement is that it is a pending requirement. They have sidewalk currently along Northwest 34th Boulevard, but under the current code, they would also be subject to providing sidewalk along the remaining adjoining rights-of-ways. But we are waiting to see the outcome of that legislation. That's, I don't know if one would like to discuss the status of that now, but just so you know, right now, under code, they are subject to whatever it is in the land development code, unless we can treat it as zoning in progress. In other words, we are waiting on the outcome of the final commission action on the sidewalk requirements. And we have given this opportunity to others who are also waiting on the outcome of that legislation. I'd like to, before leaving the podium, introduce the representatives of Redemption Orthodox Presbyterian Church. They've been waiting very patiently for their item to come up. I'd first like to introduce the pastor of the church, Pastor Fig. Pastor Fig. I'd also like to introduce David Darius. He's a city employee, but also a member of the church. And Mr. Michael McGovern. And I don't know the other gentleman.
This is my son,
Your son. Good. Well, they're here tonight representing the applicant. And at this time, I'd like to conclude staff's presentation and allow the applicant to speak.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Massey from the board? You're free. Pastor, would you like to make a comment or two?
Yeah, I'll just speak to the reasoning here. As you can see, we're a triangle trapped among streets, and we've got about 50 kids at our church. We would like to have a fenced-in, safe place where they can play outside and shade for their parents mostly. So really, this is just a picnic pavilion, not unlike you'd find at any park in Gainesville for a social space.
Unfortunately, you found out that you didn't have a special use permit for the main building, right?
We have found out many things since buying this.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for me?
Anybody from the board have a question? I think Ms. Massey pretty much
Thank you.
made it clear. Thank you. Any comment from the public on this petition? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for comments, motion. It's not that complicated, but it is an odd piece of property.
Last chance to make a motion, right? The last item. Just for the last motion.
If there's any comments? No? Okay, I move that we approve petition LD 22-118 SUP.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimous. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we're moving through things faster than I thought.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry.
I do have a, I don't want to say a member comment, but just a question for the board, if I may. We've identified that laptops tend to be bulky, and a few of you have expressed that you really don't use them. So
that needs to be
Um,
like the fence
I'm
area?
just kind of asking to see whether you would like me to continue to bring out the laptops for you, or would you rather bring your own laptops?
I'll bring my own.
Yeah, I think if we can, it was nice to be able to download the one big file rather than having to download 65 small
Oh, man.
files.
I hate the way
I-
it is now.
So,
I can just try to share my Dropbox, and I downloaded
Yeah.
every one and organized it.
it's
still
just,
not
but,
easy.
no, I
It's
was
still a
able to
pain in
get
the butt.
one like 880
Page,
page
that's what I
document,
read.
yeah,
It's
so
a pain in the
that's, yeah, it's a huge file, but like it's easy to just download one thing. If we have like that option, then I'm okay doing it on my computer. I don't have the time to download 100 files though.
You should be able to, there's, on eScribe, there's when you go to the, to the calendar on our website, you'll have the option of looking at the agenda via HTML or
Yeah.
PDF. If you click on PDF, it gives you the option to be able to download the PDF file. It is, as you mentioned, a significantly large file, but you have the option of downloading one PDF file with all the purposes.
Yeah, that's what I did
Okay.
today, yeah.
So you just
Yeah.
do the
Yeah.
It's
agenda
one
and you
huge
click
file.
PDF.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
But that's easier than having to get like 4
Yeah.
items for each thing.
Yeah, that's
Like,
what I've
I
been
couldn't,
doing, yeah.
like, I just didn't have time for that.
Okay. I don't need, I always bring my iPad anyway. I don't know, I mean, if you don't have a computer, then the city needs to supply you with one. But, and they do normally. Did you bring them today? No?
No.
Okay.
Well, and the new
Normally up
members
on
may
the
need
dais,
logins
they
and stuff
would
too,
set it
if
up.
they want to use them.
So if you want one, the city has them, and they would normally set them up on the, we're not normally down here in the tomb, but we lost out because we didn't get support from the planning department to the utility advisory.
Didn't get support.
Anyway,
Always support.
Getting harsh.
okay.
Well, if it pleases the board, I will not continue to bring out the laptops. However, if any of you request that of me, I can bring out a laptop at your
Yeah.
request. But moving forward, I'll just assume that you'll bring your own laptops. Okay.
Okay. Did we finish our,
Yeah, that was.
Public comment.
We did public comment, yeah.
We did it
Oh,
earlier.
we moved it to the.
Yeah. I would just thank Sophia for being with us, and we're going to miss you, and good luck with all of your future endeavors.
Yeah. I was actually gonna ask what y'all do with these.
Yeah, how did you get a plastic
No,
one?
no.
How
Oh
was
my
that?
gosh,
That's what I
there's
was
another
like,
name on this
No, no,
one. I'm not social anymore. I'm offended.
It's repurposed.
I think it might, yeah.
No, you're
See, I've been here.
How long do you have to be here that you get a plastic one, is I wanna know. 'Cause it's like, mine's paper, that's why I looked at yours, I'm like,
See, mine's permanently attached.
I wonder if there's anyone on the back of ours, Bob.
Megan Walker.
Mine won't even come out.
You only have to be here 10 years to get your own with nobody else on the back.
Yeah, Megan Walker.
There are thresholds you have to.
Is there any other comments? Then happy Merry Christmas,
Yeah.
Happy Hanukkah, Festivus for the rest of us, and see you on the new year.
Yep.
We're adjourned.